Hi, this is Nate Slutsky in the Verified Athletics Podcast. I spent 9 years as a college football coach. I coached Division I down to Division III, and I learned a lot during that time. And one of the things I learned is that athletes and their parents don't know what's going on in the recruiting process. So I started this podcast. I started Verified Athletics to serve them, to give them valuable information. And the goal of this podcast is to invite on college coaches and have conversations with them, one college coach to another. And I always thought that if athletes and their parents can hear the college coaches having those conversations about recruiting, they would learn a ton. All of our recruiting resources at Verified Athletics are free, so share them with your friends and family or on your own social media. And if you find the information valuable, consider donating on our Patreon site. For this podcast, my guest is Keith Bruno. Keith and I met back in 2008. He was a freshman football player at Albright College, outside linebacker, and I was his outside linebacker coach. That was my second year coaching college football. Keith is an awesome guy. He is now currently the defensive coordinator at St. Lawrence University, a Division III school up in the very top of New York State. We had a great conversation. We covered early admissions. We covered the Division III recruiting process, some of Keith's own recruiting when he was getting recruited to play college football at the Division III level, and more. So definitely sit back, relax, and enjoy. Welcome. How are you?
Doing great. It's back on campus now. We're going to start. We start Monday with coaches camp. Our players show up at 10, so we have those 2 weeks prior to get ourselves ready to go, and a couple new staff members coming on board and teaching the defense and the offense and get rolling.
That's great. And now this is your first year as a defensive coordinator, right?
Correct. First year as defensive coordinator here at St. Lawrence. Last year here, I was the recruiting coordinator and worked, mostly with the secondary. Our DC last year took off. I got an FCS job, and so I got the bump. So it's exciting. It's exciting to finally, run the show and be able to teach some of our other coaching. We have a very young staff here, with the exception of the head coach. I'm the youngest, or I'm the oldest. I'm 28.
Yeah, that's kind of typical for D3, though, it seems.
Yeah. I think our staff structure, it's probably the same as most other Division III schools. We have 5 GAs, so most of these guys are 22, 23 years old, just out of college. So that's probably one of the things I'm more excited about is having a staff and working with some younger guys that are just, fresh out of college football.
That's great. And how many of them come from your own program?
2 of our defensive GAs, yeah. So that's it. Everybody else is from pretty far away. Our new one that we just hired, 2 of them. One's from California. The other one's from somewhere in upstate New York. I think he's a pretty local guy. But two of our defensive GAs. One was an All-American here, defensive lineman. The other one was an All-Conference linebacker here. So still fortunate to have guys that very smart. They're very well respected with the players, which I think makes their transition much easier. They have some credibility with the players.
Yeah. Now from what I remember, like you played at Albright, and then when you graduated, your first coaching job was somewhere else before you went back to Albright at McDaniel.
Correct.
So you didn't have that experience of going straight from like a player to a coach on the same staff. Have you started to try to coach up your guys on how to handle that?
Yeah, so I was fortunate, like you said, to be a GA at a different school. The thing I tell these guys, the first thing is they have to gain credibility. It's tough to be, they're buddies with these guys for 4 years. It's for best friends, and so it's tough to go from that kind of dynamic and then start coaching and telling and trying to improve and make them better. So the first thing I try to tell them is you have to be able to separate yourself, obviously professionally. It's very tough to do. It is very tough to do, especially when you are the guy. You're an All-American football player here, and these are your best friends. But so they got to establish themselves, as professionals first, and then they got to show credibility. They got to show that they're going to work their tail off, that they know what they're talking about, and over time, that relationship really changes.
Yeah, and I know you guys are a pretty small town. I imagine that's probably an adjustment for them socially wise. I mean, I imagine that for them it's like college town, that's all there is, and then now they're kind of have to be removed from it in some way.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it's a little different from everybody. I'm from the Shore area, New Jersey, and even coming up here, as a coach, it's different. It's very different. But for our 2 GAs, again, that was another thing that they had to adjust from, again, separating their college life to their professional life.
Yeah, I
And I
remember.
think,
Sorry, go ahead.
and I think that they found out very quickly. I think when they first got the job, they're like, oh, well, what am I going to do? And then they found out it's just like any other town. You're not going to be bored. There's going to be stuff to do. It's They just didn't see it right away at age 22.
Yeah, I remember when I graduated college and I was looking at different coaching jobs. I was just like amazed that I would even be offered any job anywhere at any time. So like any opportunity that came along, I thought was the most incredible thing in the world. And one of the first schools that got back to me was a school in North Dakota called Minot State, I think it's called, or
Yeah.
Minot
Yep.
College, or can't
Yep.
remember. And I remember telling my mom about this opportunity to go to North Dakota and coach football in Minot, North Dakota, and she was like, no way you're gonna go there and have a good time or like that. You're gonna drive yourself crazy. Unfortunately, I got other opportunities, and maybe it would have been the best thing for me. But I think I'm glad I ended up where I did, which was at Albright, where I met you. So, actually, if you could, what I'd like to hear from you actually more is about your own recruiting experience when you were coming out of high school. I know our good friend Steve Opkenorth was the guy that recruited you at Albright College. But what first, I guess, like what went into your decision on where to go to school? How did it all play out for you? And after that, like now looking back on it, what would you have done differently now that you're kind of an expert in the game?
Well, the first thing is the college recruiting process has changed in those, it's been 10 years since I was recruited, out of high school. So there was in 2007, there wasn't Huddle, there was, so I remember sending highlight film in. I had to, find the clips from our VHS, and I got it to DVD. So to find the clips, I had to screenshot the clips to start the play. I had to, pretty much do it all myself. It wasn't as easy as it is now. But when I didn't know anything about college, especially college athletics. My older sister, she was 2 years older than me. So she went on some visits, but she wasn't an athlete. So it's a totally different experience, a totally different process when you're an athlete to a not athlete. So it was the first time going through it for my family. My parents didn't go to college, so it was all brand new. And I think, the one thing there's two things I was pretty sure I was set on is I wanted to play college football and I wanted to work in law enforcement. That was really the two things I knew when I was 17 years old. And so I started looking just locally. Again, I didn't know there wasn't the resources. I didn't have the experience. None of these services around here that could help me get exposure, help me learn. So I started looking locally, and then Coach O came into school and did a phenomenal job at least getting us interested, which was certainly the goal of your first meeting. Just get me interested, and I was. And when I went to Albright to visit, I really just felt comfortable. There was a lot of guys on the visit with me, and then I found out later on that were from the Shore area specifically, but from New Jersey, very similar to me and my family, which made me feel comfortable. And I think at that point the process became easy. I think I visited 4 or 5 schools, Pennsylvania, Eastern Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and I sat on Albright just because I really felt comfortable with not only the coaching staff there and Coach O, but the people that I was being recruited with. So, looking back, if I were to do things differently, and I'll try to put in the context, if I had all these tools like Huddle and Verify and stuff like this, but I would definitely start earlier. I tell guys all the time when they come on campus and they're here as they're walking around as sophomores and juniors, and it's the one thing I would go back and do differently. I didn't start looking at colleges till winter time of my senior year.
Yeah.
That was my first time on campus, maybe in December, or January. And, I think that's something that I don't think it hurt me because I loved where I went and I don't regret where I went and had a great experience there. It got me to where I am now. But starting the process earlier would be something that I would, if I knew the information I knew now, you get so much more. You're not rushed. You're not pressured. You have so much more time to do some research. When really my process, it was just me. Even my parents didn't even know. They didn't go to college. They didn't know what college athletics were all about. So they really just let me run with it. And I was fortunate enough to have a recruiter at Albright, and more importantly, a person that was recruiting me that cared about me and my family and what I wanted, and that made the process much easier.
Yeah, and when you say like start earlier, what like specific steps do you think that you would take? Like when would you start? What would you do to start? What are you thinking? Like what do you have in mind?
Sure. So I didn't play much when I was a junior in high school. So, but I didn't really start until I was a senior. But I certainly, after my junior year, I knew that I wanted to play college football, but I just didn't know the process. I didn't know how to start or where to look. So I think after my junior year of playing football, I would start at least just prospecting, just looking up schools in the area, looking up majors that I was interested in, looking in college football programs that I was interested in, and just getting some names on a piece of paper. And I think that's really all it is, just familiarizing myself with some of the names and some of the local colleges and universities, and getting myself familiar. The next thing I would do is that summer going into my senior year, I would probably start visiting schools. Because I think, especially now, and everything's so streamlined, with the internet and how everybody can communicate, but everything goes so quickly. Once you're in the fall, even as a high school senior, you got high school football, and you got your school, then you're applying for colleges. Everything goes so quickly, and it's very easy to miss something. It's very easy to not get all the information. Where if you visit a couple schools in the summertime, at least you get an idea. Even if it's a place you're not so sure about, right? Maybe your parents really like it, but you're not so sure. Take the visit. At least get some information to start comparing what you're looking for and what that school has to offer. And there were some places I was surprised. There was a couple schools I visited where I did not think I was going to like, and once I stepped foot on campus, it was awesome. Because I just didn't know. So I think starting that college visit process in the summertime would be the most important thing for me.
Sure. So I actually try to give advice to some athletes on how to even go about picking what schools to visit. I mean, there's hundreds of schools. There's like 1,000 that play college football. Some are more local, some are farther, right? And so there's decisions that go into it. One of the main pieces of advice I give athletes is if you're being recruited by schools, that you should check them out. And in the case that no one's really recruiting you yet, maybe it's too early for you, I always give advice to try to capture a wide variety of schools. I think it's natural for a lot of kids to think, oh, I got to go to Penn State and I got to go to Notre Dame and I got to go, because those are the schools that they know of, because those are the ones that they see on TV. But the reality is for a lot of athletes, especially if they don't know who's recruiting them, that's not what their future is going to look like. And checking out a bunch of D3 schools, checking out a bunch of D2 schools, and getting a lay of the land will help them to actually see the differences between the schools. And so they can kind of get a sense of what different things are like. I don't know. Do you think that's good advice, or would you say it differently?
Absolutely. I think it's, from if you ask I would say every at least Division III football player, maybe anybody that's not a big time FBS football player, if you ask them to describe their recruiting process or where they wanted to go or what they thought the recruiting process was about when they started to when they committed to their school, I guarantee you it's going to be night and day, because again, just the information, no one knows. It's tough. So I think, yeah, I mean, if we're reaching out to you, I think any school is reaching out to you. We're interested. I know here at St. Lawrence, and I know a lot of schools don't do this anymore. No one really does mass mailings. I don't email 300 kids in my area. I don't think anybody really wants to recruit that way. Everyone's very specific. So if we're reaching out to you, it's because we're interested, and to really throw a school to the curb right away. I think it's silly, because you have no information about what the school's about. I can't tell you how many times that, and you've definitely experienced too, coaching where you have. I initially recruit someone. They turn me down. They want to go here, there, wherever it is, anywhere but where I am. And then a couple months go by and some things change. Maybe they don't get into those schools. Maybe those schools aren't actually recruiting them. Maybe it's not a scholarship. It's a preferred walk-on, whatever it may be. And they say, you know what, I do want to visit campus, coach. I want to take a look at it. And now it's making their process much harder, because now they have a week until our deadline, and they have to get on campus and they have to apply. They have to get accepted. Where if they just take a weekend, take a day, invest a half a tank of gas, whatever it is, to visit some of these schools earlier on, it's going to make the process much easier on the back end, right? So it's like anything else. The more work you do on the front end, the easier it's going to be on the back end. And it's no different in recruiting.
Okay, going back to your experience, you mentioned that Albright kind of came up because a coach visited in the school. Is that how you created your list of schools to visit, based on, you're there in December, I imagine, and every day different coaches are coming around, and maybe you get called into some meetings with some coaches, and then you have a list of 8 schools, or how did that work for you?
Yeah, so I think, I can't remember off the top of my head right now, but I know it was some of them Albright, Gettysburg, William Patterson, Montclair, Rowan, some of the schools that were, really used the Jersey Shore and New Jersey as a great recruiting area. I remember those schools coming in, meeting with those coaches, got called down. And every coach has some different, some different techniques, but I learned a little bit about the schools. I got some information. Again, those meetings were the first time I ever did any research or any, looking into a college or university. I know I always wanted to do it, but I never really got the ball rolling. So that was my first experience with it. So when I take the information home and I start doing some research online and I start looking around, then I really develop my short list from there for at least questions I want to ask, So I think it's rare that a coach comes into school and I say, oh, okay, I want to visit right away. Really that visit was followed up by a phone call, maybe a week from then. And we just had, a conversation like we're having now and just talking about what I was interested in and what I want to do and what I want to study and what the school has to offer. And then maybe after a couple of weeks, I said, you know what, I want to take a look there. So I would say maybe that the 10 schools that came in and sat with us in high school, I probably visited, 5 of them off of, just doing research on my own. But it was really that simple, when those schools came in. Now I don't know what their process was back then in 2007. But I do know that, they met with me, they gave me some information, I did some research on my own. And then the great thing about going to college and what I loved about being, again, 17 years old at the time and my parents not going to college, this was really the first time that I get to choose what I want to do. I really couldn't choose my high school or what classes I was taking in high school or kind of the path up until that point. But going to college, especially having my parents not gone to college, that was my first experience to do what I want and to research what I was interested in and to go to the school that I wanted to. And I was very fortunate to have parents that, were supportive of that and gave me the tools and the resources to do that.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you went to Albright, and I've been meaning to ask you because this is something that I'm sure that came up in the news last year with the coach that I coached for, you coached for, you played for. They had that big controversy around standing up for the American, for the national anthem. I was just wondering, is that something that you've had experience with at your guys' school, or is that like something that's going on in campuses nationwide, or is that just case by case? Some places are dealing with some difficulty.
I think it's different everywhere you go. When I was at that school, we never experienced it because this has been going on for a while. I mean, I don't know when the first time that happened, what year it was or what season it was. I know it's been going on for a while, and I've been in at least 2 colleges since then, and I haven't seen it come up. I actually, this past season here, it's never been an issue or brought up within our team, within our staff. I've never seen it on opposing teams. So I don't know what drives it. We play very very variety of schools and schedules, and again, I'm talking in 2 years, over 20 schools. I've never seen it. So I don't know what the reasoning is or why it comes about, but I do know that it is different everywhere, and different schools have different policies and handle it different everywhere, and that's something else. Again, if that's important to you, and I think anybody that wants to protest or stand up for something they believe in, those are things that you have to ask in the process. It's very important. You want to go to a school that believes the same things you believe in. Well, if that's something that's important to you and you ask that question and they disagree with you, then maybe that's not the school for you. So it comes to whatever the case may be. It doesn't have to be as far as taking a knee during the national anthem. It could be about, how they deal with, tutoring on campus or extra help on campus, whatever it is. But you have to find something that you believe, and you have to ask those questions. Because
I think that's good advice. I think when you're going through the recruiting process, it's important to ask the tougher questions where you might be able to divide out schools into ones that are going to be better for you or worse from you. If you sometimes getting to the principles of which coaches operate and who you can agree with and who you can, I guess, get along with, for 4 years, because it's going to be your family and you're going to basically do everything, day and night with this group of people, and, making sure that you guys can do that in a great way. So asking those tough questions, but doing it in a way that maybe doesn't seem so confrontational and just really seems like information gathering, I think could be good advice for athletes as they're going through the process, just in general.
And I think doing that early too, because you can't build a relationship in a week. So if you wait to do this process towards the end, or you don't jump on the early leads or schools that are reaching out to you, you're not going to be able to build that relationship and learn about that school or that coach. And as college coaches, we're doing the same thing. I mean, I don't want to recruit somebody for 4 days and have them commit. I want to learn about them. I want to learn about them and their family and what they want. There's times during this process at every school I've been at that I've been recruiting a young man, and we start talking about what they want and what they believe, or even like what they're looking for in a major. And there's times they say, hey, maybe this isn't the place for you. Maybe our school is not the place that's going to make you thrive because it's not what you want. It's not what you believe. So, and I think a lot of people, think that college coaches just want numbers. They need bodies in here. That's not the case, at least not anymore. We're looking for the right fit as college coaches just as much as the student athlete is. And that's why sometimes we're asking those tough questions too about what you believe in. How do you feel about this? How do you work in this environment? Because we want to see, okay, is this person going to be a good fit for our school, our population, our team? But so I think those questions certainly go both ways.
Sure. And why don't you take me through how you guys actually do recruiting at St. Lawrence?
Sure. Well, every coach here, and we have 7 coaches on the road, after the season's over, and every coach has a physical recruiting territory. So, for example, I am mostly Eastern Massachusetts. So, the greater Boston area, some in Connecticut, some in the private schools in New Hampshire and Vermont, but that northeastern section of the country. So every coach has their own physical recruiting area. And then what I do is it really starts in the spring, but
the spring of like the athlete's junior year, is that what you're saying?
Correct. So that's when we'll start at our level, at least Division III level, that's when we start gathering our information. So I go through every school in my physical area, and I use every service that is available to me. So sometimes that's not using any service based on where it is in the country. Sometimes that is me going on the school's huddle and just looking at all their rising seniors. But I'm going to use every resource that I have, and I'm going to watch every single junior or rising senior. And the first thing I'm going to look at their film is, okay, can this person help us win? Okay, can this person help us win? Can this person be developed to help us win? Can this person help our team in any way, shape, or form? If the answer is yes, then we're going to move forward. And the next step is going to be at St. Lawrence. We have to be, and it's a high academic school. It's very demanding academically. So we have to start qualifying students, academically. So we're looking for students really, above a 3.3 GPA if they're going to submit their test scores, which were test optional. But if they're going to submit their test scores around a 1200, above a 1200 SAT, that would really be the next step. And if I can check off those 2 boxes, then I can start digging into it. So then I start contacting the high school coaches. I start asking about, hey, what do you know about Nate Slutsky? Tell me about his high school career. Tell me about how he works. Tell me about him in the weight room. Tell me about maybe we're calling guidance counselors right away, and we're trying to get some character references. How does this young man treat the people around him?
And you're saying this is all before you ever talk to the athlete himself, generally, or not really, or?
And generally for me, yes, because the coach, the high school coach, that's one of the best opinions I can get from a character standpoint. We're going to evaluate players how we think is important to us in St. Lawrence and what we find is best for our system and what we're looking for. But as far as character references and work ethic, I'm going to ask the high school coach because, sometimes he's going to say, hey, I find out information from the high school coach that I'm not going to find out from the student about being suspended or getting into fights or, not being in school, always late, always absent. At least if I have that information, now I can present it to the student athlete when I'm recruiting them and really dig into what's important to them. And you'll be surprised some of the answers you get, but I think it's always good to have that confrontation of truth in the recruiting process. So once I'm talking to the high school coaches, I'm getting information, but then I'll start reaching out to the student athlete, and that first conversation, which ideally is by cell phone. I don't want to do a first contact by an email or a text. That's great to get my information from, but I'd like to talk on the phone. And that first conversation, I just want to learn a little bit about them. We don't talk. Me personally, that first conversation, we don't talk much about St. Lawrence. We don't talk much about the school. We don't talk much about the football program. I want to learn about this young man and what he's looking for, and learn about his story and what he wants to do. Because the more I know about him, the more I can help push him in a direction. Maybe it's to St. Lawrence. Maybe it's not to St. Lawrence. Maybe I know, hey, we don't. This isn't going to be the right path for you, or maybe you should start looking this way. And that's that's how I think the game has changed for me, at least. It's not so much just bringing everybody in. I'm trying to help these guys, and the more I learn about them, the easier it is to help push them in a certain direction.
And in general, where are you on the timelines? Is this all happening in the spring of athletes' junior year, or have you kind of gone through time now?
Yeah. So let me go back. So when we go on the road in the spring first. And we go on the road in the spring. We have about 2 or 3 weeks in the spring. And again, I'm visiting most of my recruiting area. I have less time on the road in the spring than I do in the fall. But so I'll visit my recruiting area basically from the spring of their junior year to the summer. This is what's going on: is I'm prospecting, I'm getting information, I'm learning about recruits, I'm calling recruits on the phone. A lot of them are going to camps in the summertime, and most of those phone conversations, I'll talk to a young man. He'll say, "Hey, I'm going to be at the Syracuse camp on July 17th." I'll say, "Great, I'm going to be there. Let's meet up and let's talk. Let's have a conversation. What position are you working with? Let me see you work out." So a lot of those are the types of conversations we're having in the spring and summer. They're very general, they're very basic, but it's learning about the recruit. And then towards the end of the summer, really right about now, is we start talking about a summer visit. We have one here at St. Lawrence this Saturday coming up, next week from today. And so we have, we'll probably have 10 or 15 recruits coming up that we've met with in the spring or met with at a camp. There's some guys I didn't meet with in school just because I couldn't get there based on the timeline of the spring. But I met at a camp. We had a conversation, got their information, and then they're going to come up here in a week from today, and have their first visit. So from the spring to the summer, it's prospecting, if it's getting information, it's learning about the recruits, it's maybe setting up a summer visit. I know it's tough because football starts and families are going on vacations. I get it. But that's what's going on up until the summer. Now, from the summer, meaning August when football starts until when our season ends, typically November, December, those us being where we are in St. Lawrence here, we'll visit some kids locally. We'll go to some high school games locally. Some other colleges and universities will have a larger range where they can get to from where they're located. But we'll visit some schools locally on Friday nights, Saturdays to watch some games if we can. But again, from August until our season ends, we're spending some time on the phone. We're learning. We're getting guys to apply if they want to go early decision. If they're looking to go regular decision, we want to talk about those details, which are different everywhere you go. Some schools have rolling early decision, and those conversations are can get pretty confusing and overwhelming for a parent or a student athlete. So we take some time explaining those up until the end of the season. Once the season ends in November, December, then we can start getting on the road for the second time.
Let me actually pause you for a second because I got some questions
Sure.
about some of that stuff. So you're saying you're going on the road in the spring. You said you got 2 weeks. Now, do you already have like a list of athletes that you're trying to go see, or do you just have a list of schools that generally have guys that would be interested and capable of succeeding at St. Lawrence, and so you're just dropping by schools and trying to gather names, or are you targeting at that point?
Sure, yeah, we're already targeting. There's a couple weeks before we get on the road, when spring ball ends or when we have a break in spring ball, we're on our computers, we're on the phones, we're using every service that we can, and we're getting names, we're watching film. So anytime I go into a high school in the spring, I'm walking in, I know who I want to talk to. I've already watched their film. I probably talked to the coach already, but at that point, really, I want to put a face to a name. I want them to meet me. I want to meet them. But we have already targeted, our prospects at that point. Now, how we target them, again, it could be different. Sometimes a player will reach out to me. Maybe this high school I wasn't planning on going to just because of the spring. We have less time on the road. And I was like, I'll just phone recruit that school for right now because I can't get there in the spring. And then a kid reaches out to me and says, "Hey, coach, I'm interested. He came to a game or he talked to one of our coaches previously." And so I changed my schedule and I went to that school so I can meet that young man because he took an effort to reach out to me. So I've actually changed my recruiting schedule to go see one person at one school that may not have been in my plan because that young man showed some initiative and reached out to me and wanted to talk football. But yeah, going into the spring, we're fully targeting our student athletes. I'm not going into any high school and asking a coach who he has or going in blind. I like to know who I want to talk to. I want to watch their film. I want to evaluate. I want to have a conversation with that young man about their highlight film and talk about some things that we like, talk about some things that we see they can improve on. And I think they appreciate that.
And how many like athletes are on your list that you're recruiting in some way, shape, or form before you hit the road in the spring? So these are guys that you've already seen their highlight tape, you like the highlight tape, you've already seen the transcript, you like the transcript, and then you know that you're going to make an effort in some way to recruit them. Like how
Yeah.
big is that list for you personally? And then, obviously you got 7 coaches, we could do the math.
Sure. So I think for me personally in the spring, I'm going on the road with probably around 150 guys that I like. Maybe a little bit more, and it's going to vary obviously every year, and then what recruiting area you're in and how many schools you can get to. But I'm going to say right around 150 names going into the spring, and that number it gets it dwindles down very quickly when you meet someone that doesn't have the grades, or maybe they don't want to play college football, so that number goes down very fast. But so I'd say when we get off the road in the spring, we're going to have just under 1,000 names that we are interested in,
Right.
that we are researching, that we are making contact with throughout the spring, throughout the summer.
Yeah, so it's a huge net. You're looking at you're like recruiting at some level. You're recruiting like 1,000 athletes for, I imagine you end up with a recruiting class of what, like 40 or 50 or something like that?
Sure. So and the thing you said you could kind of cast a net, and the thing is that 1,000 that's specific.
Yeah, no, yeah, you're right. You're right.
Those are guys that we're targeting, that we are interested in, and there's going to be guys that maybe somehow fell through the cracks. Maybe their huddle was turned off. Maybe he didn't put a highlight film on there, and that's where I rely on some other services or some other coaches or some other contacts to say, hey, you should take a look at this guy. This film's on YouTube, not on Huddle. Oh, okay, perfect. So that number is that's 1,000 that we are targeting.
Yeah.
Actively. And yeah, for a class, around, we're bringing in just around 40, coming in this August. Last year, we brought in, 51 or 52. And I think Division III schools, that number is pretty, it's pretty close everywhere you go.
Yeah, actually, according to like our research and talking to coaches throughout the country, that's actually low for Division III. A lot of Division III schools are upwards of 60, 70, and some, there's schools out there that are bringing over 100 freshmen every year. But what we've seen is for Division I schools, Division II schools, the numbers are closer. Division I schools are closer to 25, Division II schools are closer to 40 or 35, and Division III schools are really that higher number.
Yeah, and I think that number too is, there's certainly a lot of variables go into it. Some conferences have roster limits, and based on who they get and transfers, maybe they can only bring in 25. I know the schools in the NESCAC, they have a roster limit. I think it might be 75, 75 players total,
right.
On the roster. So certain schools and certain conferences are certainly limited. But again, here at St. Lawrence, we're high academic. We're very demanding in the classroom, very demanding athletically. So we're going to be very specific and we're find the right guys. And I think, every coach will agree, but I know this is the way here. I'd rather have 30 of the right guys than 70 of just whoever wants to come.
Sure. And I'm hearing what you're saying with the timeline, and that you have like a list of 1,000 guys, and those are the guys that you're recruiting. I imagine that there are a handful of guys that end up at St. Lawrence that didn't start on that list of 1,000. And I think of your case, I mean, you said you didn't start your junior year. I imagine that you wouldn't have passed whatever the St. Lawrence test is, but you still ended up being a really great Division III football player. And so my question is like, what would an athlete do that doesn't have junior film? Maybe they got hurt, maybe they just weren't a starter, that still wants to play college football like you did.
Yeah. Well, I think they still go about everything the same way, and they just tell us that, because I was one of those guys. I didn't have any junior film to send in. So again, if I go out on the road in my junior year, or someone's junior year, and they don't have any film, I'm not saying, okay, like I'm done. When I go back out in the winter time and I research the teams I follow all of my recruiting areas throughout the season. So every week I see how they did. I'm going to look how my recruits did. I'm going to look who's updating their film, and you're going to find some guys that are added to that list. Maybe someone that came into a role. Maybe somebody had a stud FBS player in front of them for 3 years, as a quarterback position, and they weren't competing with them, and then they come in their senior year and they're great football players. So I wouldn't be too concerned about that at all. I mean, I don't think anybody is just writing anybody off that doesn't have junior film or they come onto them late because I'm looking at my list of recruits that I recruited this year that are coming to us from the spring to the summer. I would say half of them weren't on my list in the spring, just because they were a different area, or maybe they didn't have junior film, or they didn't update their film, or I wasn't able to get there. So of the commits that I got personally, half of them I met for the first time in November.
Right, and I think that's important for guys to understand is that coaches are building these lists, but they don't ever stop adding to the list. If the guy's good enough, they're going to keep on looking for that guy that's going to fill out the class, and a lot of times those late ads can be your best players.
Yeah, we're always looking for the best fit, and the thing is, you find a lot of high schools, and the more you're in a recruiting area, you find high school coaches that you can trust. And when these guys reach out to you, or if you reach out to me and say, hey, Keith, I got a guy for you got to look at. He's got a 3.7, he's got a 1250, great football player, great family, great kid. He just wasn't sure about the process. And you said, if you tell me about him in November, December, January, we're going to jump on him because we're going to look for guys that are the best fit for us. So I wouldn't be too concerned about if you get a late start. Because that's going to happen. You can't always control that. Sometimes, again, we talk about the film, but if you get a late start, it's not gonna make or break you. But you're certainly going to have an advantage the earlier you start.
And you said you had a list of about 150 guys. How many high schools is that coming from? Like, how big is your recruiting area in terms of numbers of high schools?
Sure. Well, when I'm on the road, basically, we got 2 weeks on the road in the spring. I'm hitting around 5 or 6 schools a day. Okay, so my recruiting area it's hundreds of schools, and there's no way you can physically visit all of those schools, which is the tough part about being a college football coach at Division III level when you have such a huge recruiting area. Is how do you prioritize where you're going to visit? How do you prioritize where you're going to spend your time? And that's what I like about when people reach out early, or the earlier I can build my list, the earlier I could be specific about where I want to go. The schools that I'm visiting, there's in one county in Massachusetts, there's 77 schools, so that's one county. So there's going to be a couple hundred high schools in my recruiting area.
Right. So that's, I think, an important point. 150 might sound like a lot to someone that doesn't understand like the math of how big these areas are and how many schools there are. That's like less than one athlete per school. So you're talking about like the best athlete at every single school. I know it's not exactly that, but that's
Sure.
Like what you're talking about. This is not just like anyone that can pick up a football.
Correct. Yeah, and it's the best fit at every school. If I go to a high school, I try to leave a high school. Now again, I'm targeting these guys beforehand. But if I can find one student athlete that I like, that I think is a good fit for us, athletically, academically, socially, high character, good references. If I could find one student athlete that I like at every school, then we're going to be just fine as far as our numbers, as far as who we have to work with. That's how you get one of those, the 100, 150 names. If you try to leave with one that you really like.
Sure, and I guess what I wanted to know too is you have 150 names, and they're coming from hundreds of schools. What is like the breakdown? Is it really like one athlete per school, or is it that you have like 20 schools that are like the best football playing schools, and they each have like 4 or 5 names, and then there's a ton of schools out there where there's really no one that fits all the criteria that you listed before? What's like it maybe somewhere in between? How would you characterize it?
Sure. So I think the example you gave is probably the more accurate one, especially the area I'm in. You get to some of the Catholic League schools and what we call the Independent School League in Massachusetts, where I recruit. High academic, very good football, and I can leave that school with 10 names if I wanted to. Now, when I have a school that has that many players that I'm interested in, well, I got to start doing my research. Okay, who am I realistically going to have a chance at? So am I going to chase the guy that has FBS and FCS offers? No, probably not. Because it's going to waste his time and my time. Now, if the kid wants to talk to me, then sure, I'll gladly talk. And hey, sometimes things fall through, things change, people find the right fit. But I think the example you gave is what's really accurate. There's going to be some schools in Massachusetts in my area that I'm going to walk out of there. I'm going to have 4 guys that I really like. And then there may be one high school that there's only one. Maybe I went to a high school targeting one young man, and then I left, and he didn't want to play college football, so I didn't have any at that high school. So it balances out over time. But yeah, you're going to find some of the schools with the larger schools that are going to have more student athletes that want to play college football and that we're recruiting.
So you think it'd be fair to characterize, like, your spring recruiting, you probably have a list of, let's just say, 30 high schools in your recruiting area that you're going to go to every year because just the nature of, like, the type of athletes that come out of there. And then you probably have another 170 schools or whatever in your recruiting area where you're going to sprinkle and you're going to hit these 30 this year and these 30 next year just based on who's available and who you know about.
Absolutely. It's a good way. It changes every year. I mean, sometimes maybe maybe there was a year where we recruited a young man from that school, and he comes to St. Lawrence, and the next year I'm going to go back to that school just because I had a great experience with the young man that we recruited, with the high school coach, and I want to support that high school and support that school, and I'll go back to a school just for that. There's times I'll stop at high schools, and we're looking at rising seniors, guys. Sometimes they're just walking around the high school, guys that maybe a year or two away, that we're not really sure about. But any high school that we have good relationships with, if one of my best friends is a high school coach, guess what? I'm going to go visit that high school, But I think what you said is the best example for it. There's probably, when I go out in the spring, I'm going to have those 20 schools. Like, I'm hitting these no matter what. If we were off the grid and I lost everything and I couldn't research anything about the school or their grades, I'm still going to these 20, 30 schools because they're going to have, they're known for good football and good grades and good people. And yeah, the rest I'm gonna pick based on,
Sorry about that. Did I lose you?
No, you hear me?
Okay. Yep. That makes total sense. What would cause you to stop recruiting an athlete in the sense that you just don't think you can get him anymore? Like, what would trigger that? You taking the athlete off the list just because you don't think you can recruit them anymore successfully?
Sure. So, I'll give you a real example. This happened this past year. I was recruiting a young man in upstate New York, high academic, good offensive lineman, very talented offensive lineman, and he was being recruited by the Ivy Leagues. Okay, so one of the Ivy League schools, they were actively recruiting him. And fortunately, I had a friend at one of those schools, so I was able to find out some information. But he really wanted to go to Columbia, and I told him straight up. I said, "Hey, listen, if you get into Columbia, then go. You should go to Columbia." That's where he wanted to go. But he was also very upfront and honest with me, and he told me, "Hey, listen, Coach, I'll keep in touch with me. Maybe just shoot me an email, a couple weeks from now, and just keep me updated on the process." So there's a couple different situations. There's some where kids, they're looking into going to a higher level school, maybe an FCS or a scholarship Division II, and they're like, Coach, I just want to focus on these schools right now, but I'm not saying no to you yet. Like, I'm still interested. Just keep in touch with me. Maybe call me a couple weeks from now. And there's some other kids that you just kind of get a feeling from. You talk to them on the phone, you meet with them in school, and they're all about this other school. There comes a point where I got to make a decision. Okay, am I wasting his time or my time? Or can I start working more on this other recruit that really likes us, is really interested in us, or am I going to spend a lot of time and effort on this young man that really doesn't want to give me the time of day right now? Yeah, and sometimes it works. Sometimes, hey, he goes to higher school. Sometimes he falls to Division III and goes somewhere else. And it's tough. And I don't think there's any rhyme or reason to it. I don't think there's any way to figure it out. It's just one of those things that is, the more you do it, I think I'm getting better at it now, being my 7th year in college. But just how to read people. And here's the thing too. It's sometimes I'll straight up ask them, hey, do you want me to keep recruiting you or not? Because sometimes you can't always read people, and they don't want to tell you no. They don't want to turn me down, but they just don't know how to say it. So sometimes when you ask the question, and they'll say, "Hey, Coach, listen, I want to go to this level, or I have an FCS look, and I really want to see that through." And then, every conversation is going to end, "Hey, listen, I appreciate it. Good luck. If I can help, let me know. And if something falls through, you have my contact info."
Yeah, that's fair. Is there like a limit to how many times you'll try to reach out to an athlete and not get a response before you just write them off and they're just off your list at that point?
Well, I think it depends on. Well, the answer is yes, but I think it depends on how much information I have. If I just have his cell phone, and maybe it's going to voicemail, maybe he's not answering text. I know there's always issues with cell phones and communication, but if someone doesn't answer their cell phone, I'm not going to just write them off and say, you know what, forget it. I'm going to, once I lose contact with the student athlete or I can't get in contact with the student athlete, I'm going to reach out to the coach. So I'm going to talk to the high school coach, make sure he knows, hey, we're interested here. I've tried to reach out to Nate. He hasn't been answering me. I don't know if something's wrong. And listen, sometimes there's an issue. Sometimes there's something going on at home. Sometimes there's an issue with their phone. And you learn about that. Other times the coach is like, you know what, I'll ask and I'll get back to you. And the coach is like, hey, he's not interested. He wants to look elsewhere. So I'm never just going to reach out to a kid by email, text, and cell phone. And then if he doesn't answer, I'm going to say, forget him. I'm going to reach out to his coach. I'm going to try to reach out on social media. I'm going to try to reach out to his home phone number, because I get there's, in today's day and age, there's things going on. There's problems, there's issues, and it's easy to get lost, and especially in the recruiting process. There's so many schools out there, and for a 17-year-old to get overwhelmed, it's tough. So I'll certainly use all my resources, and if I call him and text him and email and use his Twitter and his high school coach and at home, and I get nothing, then at that point I'm just deleting his name and moving forward.
I gotcha. And so you make it through the spring, you have your list of names, you have contacts with guys throughout the summer. How does it play out from there? Like when are athletes committing? How does the list shake out? How are you adding more names to your list? Play me through the rest of the recruiting process.
Yeah. So, a couple things for us is, throughout the fall is we're going to invite guys up if they're in the area, because, most of our guys are traveling in good ways. Throughout the fall, we'd like to get guys up for a game day visit. I think that's very important for anybody that wants to play college football, is to get on campus for a game. See the game day atmosphere, see the players in action, and that's something we haven't talked about yet. But I think Division III gets a negative stigma to it about the talent level or the quality of football. And I have yet to have somebody come to one of our games and not be floored with the people that are running out there, that are running around the football field. So I think getting on campus for a game is very important at whatever level you want to play, college football. So we'll try to get guys up here, for those games, but we will continue that contact. We'll continue the phone contacts, the emails, and game day visits up until our season's over. Now, every school is going to be different, but then once we get to a certain point in the fall, we're going to start talking about applications. You're going to get the feeling, or a young man's going to say, hey, coach, I want to apply. How do I apply? Well, every school is different. Here at St. Lawrence, we have early decision. So we accept early decision applications, from November 1st to February 1st. So we have, people may call it rolling early decision, but we have, those months span there where they can apply early decision. And early decision means, different things at different colleges. And we also have regular decision. If they want to apply regular decision, it's going to take much longer for them to get their response back. If you apply regular decision, which the deadline is still by February 1st, you're going to get notification from us, the first or second week of March, with your acceptance or denial, and your financial aid package, your scholarship money, and all that. So
what's the downside to going early decision? Is there any?
Well, early decision, it's binding on paper. So basically, here's what happens. If someone visits a couple of schools and they come to St. Lawrence and they visit here and they say, hey, coach, this is where I want to be. Right. So if you find a school that it's where you want to be, then apply early decision, because what that's going to do, it's going to get your acceptance back earlier. It's going to be on, once you apply, it's going to be a couple weeks and you'll get it back, and you're going to get your scholarship money and everything back, done, signed, sealed, delivered, FAFSA, everything. So that's the advantage to going early decision. The disadvantage is, again, there's some ethical binding rules that go with it, that some schools honor and some schools don't. clearly, if you go early decision and the school tells you it's binding, if you don't go there, they're not going to take money out of your account. They can't force you to go to any school that you don't want to. But there are ethical reasons behind the early decision binding agreement. And again, some schools honor it and some schools don't. It's just up to them.
So to understand, I really don't understand this that well because I never coached a
Sure.
school where that was a factor, and it never seemed to play into my recruiting against other schools either. But so to understand that better, if you're an athlete and you apply early decision, the goal is like you're only applying early decision to one school. That's the school you want to go to, and you want to find out as soon as possible to figure out that, all right, my college decision is done versus I have to keep my options open because I didn't get into the school I wanted to. I think that's the idea. And
Correct.
the way it plays out in reality is that if you get in, no one's going to force you to go there. And there's like you said, it's more of like an ethical decision as to whether or not you're going to honor your side of the agreement. Like part of the agreement of you applying early decision was based on you fulfilling that commitment at the end. But I got to imagine that if you don't know what your financial aid package is until after you get it, then you can't know for sure whether or not that's something that you could realistically do. And then you said that there's some colleges that would honor that. I assume that means that if you apply early decision to another school, some colleges, and you get accepted, some colleges wouldn't take you or wouldn't allow you to apply to them. Is that real, or
Correct.
is that? Let me help me to understand that.
So let me just go back and like for at least us at St. Lawrence, so if you apply early decision, so if St. Lawrence is your first choice, then we're going to encourage you to apply early decision. If this is where you want to be. So if you're admitted, and you have satisfactory financial arrangements, so basically you can afford to come here, that's that's how it works out. But if you apply early decision and you get your financial aid package and you can't afford it, well, then you can't afford it, so you withdraw your application or you go through the appeal process and try to maybe see if you can get some more financial aid in there. So, but as far as we were talking about the other schools, and I've dealt with this before, and I've seen it from friends in the business that you're recruiting a young man early decision. He goes early decision at one school, and he's waiting to get that decision back, and he's already accepted at another school. Well, when the school that he applied early decision to finds out that he's going somewhere else, they're gonna call the school, and they may try to start a fuss. I don't know. I'm not on that end of the admission side of things. But again, there's like some schools won't care if they don't have early decision. If College A doesn't have early decision, then they don't care if you apply early decision elsewhere. It doesn't affect them. And I'm sure that has a lot to do with who's in charge. With who on the admission side is calling the shots. But I've seen kids have to withdraw their applications from other schools, and I've seen kids not care that they went early decision, and the only thing they lost was their deposit that they had to put down on early decision, and they went elsewhere.
I see. Okay, that makes some sense. It seems like that it's mostly an ethical, a moral arrangement where people are just making the decision to honor their word in certain ways, and that there might be some mechanistic enforcement of it, but that seems to be the secondary point.
100%. And here's the thing, like that scenario that I just tried to explain, it's even tough explaining. That doesn't happen every day. That's not something that you go through. The people that apply early decision are those that say, hey, that school is where I want to be. And I want to get I want to get my acceptance back as soon as I can. I want to get my financial aid back as soon as I can, so I can say, okay, this is where I want to go. I'm done.
Right.
So again, the earlier you start the process, you can apply your own decision here at St. Lawrence on November 1st. So if I meet you in the spring and you come up to a summer visit day and you do a game day visit in the fall, maybe you apply November 1st, and before you even finish your football season, you know where you're going. And it's done. So there's the advantage to starting earlier for sure.
I got you. And then the next thing that I was curious about is like, would you, as far as advice for early decision, what I'm hearing, the way how I would advise it is that if you're going to apply somewhere early decision, you should do it in good faith, meaning that your intention at that time is that when you get accepted, that's where you want to go, and that'll be the end of it. And if you get cold feet later on, or if you like have financial hardships that make it impossible to make it realistic, and you have to then open up other options, as long as you're being honest about it throughout the way, then like it seems like that's fair game, or would you describe it differently?
No, 100%. And the biggest piece of advice I would say is and because a lot of people, I mean, don't a lot of student athletes and their families don't know this information. I mean, you've coached at a higher level, but you were asking questions about it, right? So it's a confusing process. So the best piece of advice is one, what you said, and two, be upfront and honest with your recruiting coach and ask them questions about it. And they're going to direct you the right way. They're going to tell you, hey, you should maybe you should apply early decision, maybe you should apply regular decision. They're going to direct you to what is best fit for you, and they're not going to put you, especially here at St. Lawrence. I'm not going to put you in a bad spot, but to have the information and certainly, like you said, being upfront and honest about it and asking questions to the college coaches is going to help.
And tell me from your experience, like, I would think that there would be a very small percentage of high school athletes that would be willing in November of their senior year, so 3 months before signing day, to say, this is the D3 school I know I want to go to, and that's it. Most athletes, I feel like, are still at that point holding on to the opportunity for scholarship offers, whether D2, Division One, and want to keep their options open before committing to a Division III school that early. But maybe I have the wrong impression, and maybe I'm right in it. But there is a small fraction of athletes that want that. Help explain that to me.
Yeah, and I mean you're right, I mean, with your assumption on it. If I look at our incoming class of around 40 student athletes, we had 2 decide this is where they wanted to be before Christmas time. So most of our guys were making their decisions in February, in March. That's when they were making their decisions. So guys, it's rare, especially at this level. I don't think, I mean, I look at my experience, I had no idea where I wanted to go, until I was a senior. But from here at St. Lawrence, at least, again, we had 2 guys that figured out before Christmas time, hey, this is where I want to be. I got in, I went early decision, I got accepted, I got the money, I liked financially what I have to pay. Yeah, let's do it. This is where I want to be. And the reason why those guys were able to do that and were able to make that decision is because they started the process early. Again, they were up here in the summer. They were up here for a game. They were up here for a visit day, in December before Christmas time, where they ultimately committed, a week after that. So they did everything just, 3 months ahead of everybody else, and that's why they're able to make that decision. So I don't think there's anything right or wrong. I don't think there's any, certainly the earlier you start making your list as a student athlete for where you want to look, the sooner you can narrow it down, the sooner you can make a decision.
That makes sense. And so take me back. All right, we were getting off the road in the spring. You had a list. You had gone onto the road with 150 names on your list, and now you're getting into the summer, the season. Once the season starts, how many people are on that list? How are you interacting with them, like, during the course of the season or the summer? What should, like, a normal, like, say, recruit, someone that's at the level that would be recruited by a school like St. Lawrence, what should they be expecting? What would be typical?
Sure. Well, I don't think that number, as far as the athletes that I'm recruiting, drops off from spring to fall, or spring to beginning of the season, just because, again, they don't know, and at that point they haven't been on campus yet. I've only had a couple conversations with them. But throughout the season, what they could be expecting from me is every week I'm going to try to reach out to my recruits. Okay, or every week, every 2 weeks, maybe I'm going to try to reach out to my recruits. And maybe it's not always a phone call. Maybe it's a text message before their game or after their game, just to check in, because and you've coached at Division III and Division I levels. The time in game planning and game weeks, and there's not a lot of time. There's not enough hours in a day to get everything done that you want to get done. So they can expect a text message every couple weeks. They can expect a couple emails. They may get email updates from us based on this is what happened in our game last week. This is who we're preparing for next week. They may get updates around the school. The other thing they should expect is, most likely when I met them in school, I put their name in our database for admission. So they should start getting emails and maybe some actual physical mailings from the university about the school, about the academic programs, financial aid, application process. Me personally, I don't like bombarding everybody with phone calls and text every week as they're October, November, getting ready for their finals, their first semester of high school, and also preparing, and going through high school football. I don't want to be another burden on them. So, but here at St. Lawrence, again, they can expect a text message, they can expect a phone call, they can expect an email, just something really to update them on us and to hear how they're doing, hear how their season's going, hear how they're doing, and really just maintain the communication up until they want to plan a visit after their season's over.
And everywhere I've ever been, even if I have a list of, say, 100 names at this point, it's not 100 names that are all equal, right? For me, it's always been they're tiered in some way, ranked in some way, and that tiering or ranking would determine the way in which I would recruit them during that time. And so I'm curious, number one, is that how you would operate? And if so, like, could you explain that a little bit more?
Sure. So, and every college, every university is going to have a different, athletic ranking system. But one, I'm going to research guys. One that, first of all, some of the guys I met, some of the names on that list I just made of, I got from, maybe I didn't meet them in school, but I'm going to target guys, one, first and foremost, that have interest in us. Okay. So if you are making an effort to contact me and you have interest in us here at St. Lawrence or whatever school, that I'm recruiting at, those are the guys I want to reach out to first. Those are the guys that want to be here. I want to make some progress with those guys. So that would be number one. As far as, is the rest of the, how the rest of the tiering system works, I think it always varies. There's a lot of variables. Maybe it's somebody that's looking for, that has a scholarship offer. Maybe he's got a Division II scholarship offer, an FCS scholarship offer. I'm not going to be contacting him the same way I would be contacting someone that maybe doesn't. Because even on my end, I gotta divvy my time up, and I gotta find out what's the the investment for me, right? The what's worth my time to recruit. If I know somebody that hasn't been answering me or is going to FCS visit days and has official visits elsewhere, I'm not going to spend a lot of time recruiting those guys the same way as I would recruit somebody else that maybe he's visiting very similar schools in our conference. He's everything we're looking for. So certainly the guys that I'm going to target are guys, like I said, one, who I think are the best fit for us, which I can determine throughout the spring, right? So I'll highlight guys that I really liked, right? Even a conversation with, I really like this guy, had a great conversation with him. He's our type of guy. I'm gonna focus on those guys. And then again, the ones that reach out to me, I don't care where you were ranked or where I felt about you. As far as an athletic standpoint, if you're reaching out to me, I'm gonna spend some time on you as well.
And is like how they rank athletically, like in terms of how much you think they can make a difference athletically for your team, is that a factor at all in how often you would say text or call or anything during the course of the season or into the winter?
I don't think that affects the frequency of the contacts, just because they can't control whatever their ranking is, and I'm not gonna, just because someone may be ranked a little bit lower, a little bit higher. One, it doesn't mean that's what they are. That's just what I see on film. So I think that the ranking system is just really for us to get organized. Really, it's for us. So when we have things on paper, when we have guys visiting, we can have an idea of where guys stand. But as far as the frequency of contact, it's not gonna change anything for me. Again, I'm looking for guys with the best fit. Just because someone athletically may be ranked a little lower, he may be a better fit than the guy that's ranked higher than him. That's just an athletic ranking. It's a combination of athletics and academics and character and their passion for the game and how interested they are in us. So those are the factors that really affect how frequently I'm going to contact somebody, not their athletic ranking.
Okay. And so you think that athletes that are being recruited, the thing that they should be looking for are texts or calls, it doesn't not necessarily every week, but maybe every other week or every 3 weeks. And that would be something that would indicate that you guys are interested.
Sure. And and here's the thing too, it's don't be afraid to reach out to us, because and you know what this is about. There's times that we get lost in the mix sometimes. We got games coming up, we got game planning, everyone's recruiting, trying to maintain their 150, 200 names, whatever it is. So it's nice when I come in a morning on a Sunday morning or Saturday morning and I get an email from Nate Slutsky out in Massachusetts that would say, "Hey coach, just wanted to check in. We played last night. This is what happened. Really looking forward to coming up in the wintertime." Well, I'm gonna reach out to Nate and make sure that we don't doesn't forget about us, and we don't forget about him. So don't be afraid to reach out to the college coaches. I think sometimes student athletes get nervous about that. Even if it's not over the phone, even just an email or a text, like they're bugging us. You're not bugging anybody. I would love if you reach out to us and give me an update on your season. The more information I know and the more context we have, the better it's going to be.
Yeah, and I think that might be different at different divisions. I imagine that same thing doesn't play as well at major FBS schools and even FCS schools, from my experience. Where at that point, I think that those coaches are getting so many of those types of communications and contacts that I think to really step out and be someone that could maybe break through and get notice would be either like a personal visit to a school, because it's hard to ignore someone that's sitting right in front of you. And also having your high school coach be the one that reaches out, because that's more of a long-standing relationship usually between the coach and the college coach versus you and the college coach. And so depending on what division you're looking at, I think you could have a different approach and be successful.
Absolutely.
So then you get to the end of the season, and this is so different than when I remember coaching Division III football and my recruiting timeline. And I don't know how much of it is just different staffs having different mentalities, or how much of it is just the changing in times and huddle and all those other things, and timelines getting moved forward. But you get out of the season, and then it's about probably getting guys up for official or unofficial, depending on how you want to determine it, visits up to your campus, showing them around, hopefully giving them the experience to help them make a good decision. And then how does that process play out from there? Do you guys have like a limited number of spots that you guys are jockeying people in position for, you guys are closing up, or is it kind of like you're just recruiting guys that are good enough and great fits and you get what you get? How does that work?
Well, so everybody, we'll have here at St. Lawrence, we'll have maybe 5 official visit weekends, which are 2-day long events. So we'd have people come up on a Saturday afternoon. They'll do a recruiting event during the day. They'll stay overnight with a player host. And we'll have breakfast in the morning and then send them on their way. So depending on what
time of year is this? Like, when do these weekends happen?
So we do here at St. Lawrence this past year. We did one before Christmas time, and then we did 2 or 3 in January. Then one the first week in February.
Okay, so all before signing day.
Correct.
Okay,
correct.
Interesting.
Now here's the thing. Now for us, our application deadline is February 1st. So after we have to get everything done before February 1st anyway, because that's when the application deadline is. Now, if you can't come to an official visit weekend, well, then you just come up any day you want. You just reach out to your recruiting coach and say, hey, I want to come up on Tuesday. Fine. We're in our office, and it's going to be a different format. It won't be so much of a group where we have some guys on campus, but it's going to be whatever day works for you is the best fit. So depending on when you come up, though, they do their official visit. At that point, they've already applied. They're waiting on their acceptance. So once they visit campus and they leave, I'll probably wait a day or two. Then I'll follow up with them and just kind of get a temperature check on what they thought about the campus, what they thought about the coaching staff, the players, their overnight. I like to talk to their parents. I like to talk to the high school coach and just kind of get an idea of where they stand. From there, it's really the toughest part for the college coach at this level, Division III level, and the student athlete is often at that time it's a waiting game. If they applied regular decision, they're waiting a month to figure out if they're accepted and how much money they're getting. Now again, here at St. Lawrence, we're such a specific and a high academic school that if we bring you on campus, it's there's a pretty good chance you're going to get accepted. And that's something that we're upfront and honest with right away. I'm not going to bring someone on campus that I think is going to get denied. And if I think so, then I'm going to tell them right away, like, hey, we should probably wait to see what your acceptance is, or just to give you an idea, this is what I think is, this may happen, or I'm not sure about the outcome of this application, just where you are GPA and test score wise. But that's always a tough part after the visit, because it's a lot of waiting. And then that's the stressful part. You see the stress from the student athletes. You see the stress from their parents because they're just waiting for their financial aid package. They're waiting for acceptance. And there's really not a lot for them to do once they make their visits. Now, what we do to kind of help that is if they enjoyed their first visit, we like to invite them back up for a second visit. Maybe they're coming up for an ice hockey game. Okay, ice hockey is very big up here at St. Lawrence. We have a Division I ice hockey team, so maybe we get them up to an ice hockey game or a basketball game. Maybe we go out and we see them in their home. Maybe we go out again and see them in their high school a second time. Something to keep showing our interest, because I know it gets tough that time of year.
And as far as like number of roster spots or like jockeying for position to get, like, is that a factor for you guys, or is that not something that really plays into it for you?
No, for us, I mean, we don't have a roster limit. We don't have a number that we have to hit or maintain or stay above or stay below, for that matter. So we're fortunate to here to have a lot of freedom, to bring in who we want. If position wise, I think every staff has a goal for how many they want in a certain position. But let's say if we want 3 quarterbacks this year and we already have 3 committed, we're not going to stop recruiting quarterbacks. We're going to make sure those quarterbacks know, if they ask and say, hey, how many quarterbacks you bringing in? Well, even though I personally don't like that question, I'm going to tell them, hey, we have 3 guys coming in. But I'm recruiting that young man because he's a good fit. He's not a bad fit just because there's 3 guys committed before him. So position numbers or position goals, those are just guidelines and things to help us maintain our stability on our roster. But we don't have any limits or anything we have to maintain as far as roster spot.
Yeah, that's really a luxury at Division III schools or non-scholarship schools typically, where it's not so strict as far as once the scholarship is eaten up, that's it. You can't create new scholarships out of thin air. You have limits, and so Division III schools usually have a little bit more room to play with, where they can just recruit the athletes they want and then get the ones that they get, and then build a team from there.
Yeah.
So that's pretty great. My last question is, tell me about St. Lawrence. I don't know much about it. I know where it's at. I know it's in upstate New York.
Yep.
But what do you like about it? What's cool about it? What are your athletes like about it?
Sure. So, the thing that when I interviewed here at St. Lawrence, a year ago, almost to the day, I didn't know much about the school. Again, now I think I got a letter from St. Lawrence in 2008. Actually, I think my mom found it when I took the job here. But I didn't know much about St. Lawrence, and being from the shore area where I am in New Jersey, where I grew up, there's a lot of schools there, right? So when I came up to St. Lawrence, a couple of things stuck out to me. One, when I interviewed here, everybody that I met on campus that was working here was an alum, which I think is strange. And to me, because I never, the other colleges I met at, everybody that I was introduced to in admissions or financial aid or the cafeteria, whatever it is, they were just, they were from wherever. And here there's a lot of alumni, which when I was interviewing was important to me, because that means that this school really takes care of its people. The fact that some of these people either graduated from St. Lawrence and started working right away, or they graduated, left, and came back. There's something that pulls people to St. Lawrence. Now, it's a small school. It's around 2,400 undergrad students. It's in a small town, a small college town. But I think that's what drives people here. It's a very specific, tight-knit community. Last year, St. Lawrence, it was announced we had the number 3 alumni network in the country. I think number 1 was Penn State, number 2 was Wabash, and 3 was St. Lawrence. So now when I heard that, it really makes sense that the alumni here, really strong alumni base. When I was recruiting in Boston, I was walking downtown Boston getting dinner one night, and I had a St. Lawrence sweatshirt on, and I was stopped multiple times with people that graduated from St. Lawrence or knew someone that went to St. Lawrence. So it's a very tight-knit community, which I love. Our players here, I think, are all very, everyone's very similar. And I think, 95% of our roster is very similar. And I think that just comes to how we recruit, and how the school is recruited for years prior. Very specific in who we're going after. Here's something that's interesting, and I don't know what the numbers are, and maybe you can elaborate on it a little bit as far as your yield when you actually, when you're recruiting student athletes and how many you start with. And I think an average yield is around 30%. I don't know if people, get 3 out of 10 of students that visit campus. Here at St. Lawrence, our yield last year was over 50%. So what that tells me is when you get on campus here, it's a little bit different. Right? People may not be so sold on it because we're 6 hours from Boston, or we're 2 hours north of Syracuse, and that's scary. That's a scary thing to go through any school you're traveling to. But when they get on campus, over half of the recruits that we brought on campus committed. And I think that's what's special about St. Lawrence. As you get here, it's such a tight-knit, close community, good people that share the same values, that share the same beliefs, that want to help each other. And then that's what makes it such a special place to go to school and play football.
It sounds like it's like you have to, not that you have to see it to believe it, but you have to like feel it. You have to be there. You have to get the feeling, and it has a unique feeling that you don't get at other places. That's kind of how I hear you describing it.
Absolutely. I mean, we've had some guys come up from Florida who never seen snow for the first time. So they get off the plane up here and everybody's walking down the path to campus and they're running through the snow. So they're starting to see different things. But again, it's really the atmosphere when you get on campus, and that's why I love getting people up here for game day visits, getting around the faculty, getting around the players, getting around this student body. When you have a tight, such a small school like St. Lawrence, with the people that, they graduated from here, they live here, they work here, they live, eat, and sleep St. Lawrence, and that's what really makes it special.
That's great. Well, it's your first year as a DC. What should we expect to see from St. Lawrence defense this year?
Well, I think, I hope our guys are excited to play. I think you're going to see guys that are running around excited to play football, guys that have a sense of urgency, and you're going to see not such from defense, but from the St. Lawrence team in general. We struggled last year. We were 2-8, so I think you're going to see a team that's hungry, a team that wants to compete, a team that wants to battle. They come here August 10th, so I'm really excited to get rolling.
And are you going to try to stay similar to what you guys had done last year defensively, or are you going to bring with you things that you learned elsewhere? Maybe anything, or what's your philosophy? What's changing? What's staying the same?
Sure. Well, I think anytime, every year you're always going to evaluate different things, right? So whether there's a staff change or not, at the end of the season, you're going to evaluate your personnel. Okay. So who do we have? What can we do? What can we do well? Evaluate, what direction we're going as a team. What do we want to be known for? Evaluate who we're going to play. What teams are we going to see? What schemes are we going to see? Let's try to, so I think every year things change, they have to. I mean, how much has the game changed from 2008 when you were coaching at Albright till now, just offensively? I mean,
there was no zone read, so it changed a lot.
It's night and day, right? So every year you're going through these changes, whether it's staff change or not. Fortunately, defensively here, Scott Vallone, who you knew, who was the DC here, who is now the D-line coach at Fordham, he did a great job in his 2 years here as a DC of creating an identity and creating a work ethic with this team. And so I don't think we're changing much. I think we're just picking up where we left off. So the game's always changing. The defense and offense are always evolving. But I think we're just picking up right where we left off. We're changing things maybe based on our personnel, and no different than any other year.
That's exciting. I'm looking forward to watching you guys play and seeing how you do and watching it throughout the rest of your career. So we're excited for you. I'm excited for you. Thanks a lot for taking the time to do this call.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
All right. See you, Keith.
I see you.
Thanks for listening. I thought Keith was awesome and fountain of information. We're going to invite on more college coaches and try to help more athletes and their families understand the recruiting process. We also have a beginner's guide to college football recruiting on our website at verifiedathletics.com. All of our recruiting resources at Verified Athletics are free, so share them with your friends and family. Post them on social media, and if you find them valuable, consider donating to our Patreon page. Thanks again.